Anyway, what can I do for you? Welcome. That's going to be an unforgettable name. I'm just going to use it for the rest of the night.
I want to say this is a trip just because I used to be like 12, listening to Burn in Hell at like my sister's softball games and stuff. So basically, like,
All right, I'm going to stop you right there. Welcome. Burn in Hell is the one that nobody ever references. That's the one? You heard that?
I used to download it on like YouTube to MP3.
Oh my God.
This is awesome.
You are welcome.
I don't want to ask too much.
You can ask anything you want.
I love Prince.
Yes.
I want to know everything about him. And then when's the footage coming? Like, everything about it.
All right. I can deliver for you exactly that, but knowing that I get lost in the story sometimes, remind me to tell you what happens to the footage, because that's important. What was his royal badness like? He was singular. He was the kind of individual I haven't met many times in this business. He was a true icon and insanely batshit talented, gifted. Could literally do anything. Not that much different from Logic. Logic is very much the same way. Alan Rickman was kind of the same way. But when I encountered him, he had just gone through some upheaval in his life. He'd lost his child, his marriage kind of dissolved in the wake of that, as often happens when people lose a child. And he was very, in moments like that, that's when the Lord, comes calling, and that's when people find the most use for faith. So he had become a Jehovah's Witness, which I say with no judgment or anything like that. I was raised Catholic. I believe that my fucking God is a magic carpenter, So I'm not saying anything about like him being Jehovah's Witness, but they are a pretty strict faith, that eliminates birthdays and shit like that. And recruitment is a big part of their faith. In the Catholic Church, they're like, just tell others. In fact, the Catholic Church is like, don't tell anybody. We want anybody else. Back then, now they're like, get everybody quick. Jehovah's Witnesses, when they do stuff like eliminate birthdays, some people can't take that trip. He took the trip, and when it came to recruitment, he also took the trip. Which means that just like, if you've ever been sitting around your house, the doorbell rang, and you opened it up, and there were nicely dressed folks who were like, hi, can we talk to you about everlasting life and sell you a copy of Watchtower? He did that. Prince went door to door. They told me, they were like, he does it. And I was like, you're fucking kidding me. You got it when you're Jehovah's Witness. And I was like, could you imagine fucking like opening the door, like, one of these Jehovah's Witnesses. Let's go crazy. So he had seen Dogma, and it impacted him greatly. And we were working on Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, and we were out in Los Angeles, living in the Valley for like, it was supposed to be 3 months, but then we wound up staying for like 9 months and shit. And so I got a phone call, and they were like, Prince would like to speak with you. And I was like, Prince? Yeah, okay. Who is this? And I was Prince's assistant. I got your number from folks at Miramax and shit. And I was like, oh, yeah, well, okay, I would love to. Yeah, I'm ready. And they're like, oh, he'll be calling in 3 hours. And I was like, okay. Hung up and shit. And fucking like an hour later, like, Prince will be calling in 2 hours. Kept updating me and shit. Prince will be calling in 15 minutes. And then fucking eventually that the cum shot happened. They were like, Prince calling. And I was like, oh, and it was him. He was like, hey, how are you? And I was like, oh my God, it's fucking the kid from Purple Rain. I said, how are you? And he talked about how much he liked Dogma, and he said, that's what I want to do. I want to make a movie that just puts the words Jesus Christ is Lord on the screen, and people got to deal with it. And I was like, well, I mean, I kind of just made that movie. I'm up for doing it again if you like. And so he invited me to come to Paisley Park and shoot a listening party he was going to have for his album, The Rainbow Children. He was at a point in his career where he'd figured out, wisely, he didn't need a label. He could fucking sell direct to his fan base. He had the New Power Generation Music Club and stuff like that. He's really ahead of his time when it came to internet and kind of just distributing music over. The one block he seemed to have was fan sites. He didn't understand that that was a great thing, and he would try to shut them all down. Like where it's like, no, encourage, that's free fucking advertising. He was like, only I could have my stuff. That part he didn't quite make the connection with. Everything else though, he was there like early, like him and porn, like figured out how to turn the internet into a commercial ground, how they could sell and fucking accept payments and stuff. So I went out, it was pre-that, this is 2001, and he had done this album called Rainbow Children, and the idea was he was having a listening party, so a bunch of fans who were part of the New Power Generation MPG Music Club, you know, he had a fan base like beyond just the people that knew his stuff, people that paid to be part of the thing. And he was able to say like, okay, we're doing an event, come here. I had gone to an event for New Year's Eve, Raven to the Year 2000 it was called, his New Year's Eve show. So I went to Paisley Park that night and I'd seen the layout and stuff. And I think he had heard that I was there. And years later when he saw Dogman, people were like, oh, he came to your fucking thing. And was like, get him on the phone, because he didn't know any of my other shit whatsoever. Like I asked him, I was like, do you ever see Clerks? He's like, no, I probably won't. But the point is, just move right the fuck on and shit. Like he had an agenda. So we were in post on Jane Silent Bob Strike Back. We're getting ready to release a movie and stuff. We're in the final like month. But you know, fucking how often is Prince gonna call and say, come shoot a documentary for me? So you know, before I could even finish telling Jennifer, I was like, Prince called and she was packed and on the plane. So we all went, me, Jen, the kid, and Jen's parents lived with us at that point and stuff. So I spent all day, you know, at Paisley Park with him and doing these listening parties. And it was strange. He was like, you know, very serious about everything. Just, you know, there was no fun to be had. Very much a businessman, business person. Just, you know, this makes sense. And it's so crazy because you watch him perform and he fucking left it all out there, man. But like behind the scenes, he ran Prince World and stuff. And so he told me what he wanted to do. He's like, we're gonna listen to the album and then people are gonna sit around and talk about it. I want you to shoot the conversations. And I was like, okay, who's gonna lead the conversations? He's like, you can. And I was like, all right, how? He's like, just ask them what they thought of the album. Start there. Just start asking questions. And I was like, okay. And I was sitting there going like, this is, like, shouldn't he be the one asking the questions? And I was also trying to compare it to something. I was like, well, when we do screenings, we have test screenings, and there's a focus group leader at the end of it who keeps the 20 people around and asks questions. What'd you like? What didn't you like? What can we change? I was like, sounds like that, I guess. So maybe I'll do that. And so I had my cameraman, the guy who shot it, was a guy named Afshin. Who's the girl who's on Blackish? Who plays the daughter? Her. She's like fucking huge, famous now and shit. Heard that was her dad. He worked on Afshin Shahidi, I think his name was. He worked on Mallrats with us. He was like the assistant camera. So when I went back years later, he lived in Minnesota. He was the guy shooting the fucking doc. So I was like, Afshin, what's up? He had a kid. Years later, his kid became super famous. Now I know this because I was interviewing people on the IMD boat at San Diego. And I was interviewing her. And her mom came over and she goes, do you know Afshin? And I was like, there's a name I haven't heard, and you know, Obi-Wan Kenobi and shit. And she was like, this is his daughter. I was like, are you fucking shitting me? Oh my God, that's amazing. So Afshin was the guy shooting it. He's like, what are we doing? I was like, here's second figures, we're just having like a focus group conversation and shit. And I asked Prince, I was like, you gonna be there? He goes, absolutely not. He's like, I'm gonna be up at the house. And I was like, and we were at Paisley Park, his recording studio, his complex, and his home was not too far away. And I was like, well, aren't you interested in what they're gonna say? He's like, oh, I'll hear everything. I was like, how? He's like, every room at Paisley Park is wired to record, which means it's wired for me to listen to it as well. And I was like, well, that's creepy. All And so fucking with very little info, people came, listened to the record, and they came into the grand room and shit, where the big piano was and whatnot, big white piano. And we went for it. I was like, okay, and so they were, this was 2001, so I've been around publicly since '94. So I've been 7 years into my career, and I wasn't as well known as I am now, but I was fairly fucking well known and shit. And so for the 300 people that walked through the door, I would say 75 of them were like, "Is that Silent Bob?" So I got up and I was wearing a sleeveless hoodie in those days, and I was like, "Hey man, so y'all just listen to the album. We're going to talk about, have a discussion, and shoot me. These cameras are going to capture and whatnot. And it's going to be for a documentary that Prince wants to do." And so we started having conversations, and the album elicited different responses from different people. Triggered some people loved it, some people were like, "Hey man," because the movie was the music was very religiously based. Like in the music, the lyrics were like, man is the head of the household, woman is under man, and shit like that. And just stuff that was kind of like maybe traditional. So right away, as we were talking, there were people who were like, "I'm not comfortable with this shit at all. Like, why is he doing this?" And then there were some people like, "But this is his evolution. Like, this is where Prince is right now." And they were having these discussions back and forth. So it was kind of interesting and whatnot. We're swinging from side to side. We've got a crew of 4 people. I'm off camera, I'm not on camera. I'm just and then to keep the ball going if the conversation dies or move it to somebody else. Like, "What do you think about that?" And the camera goes there. So at a certain point, we're 2 hours into this, 2 fucking hours into this. And as I'm speaking to somebody and they start talking, I see out of the corner of my eye, somebody comes into the back of the room and it's fucking Prince. And so when I see him, I'm like, "Well, fuck, I'm fucking not letting him go." And so I said, "Hold on, let me see if somebody else agrees with you. Sir, standing in the back, do you have any thoughts on this?" And fucking everybody turned around, they're like, "Oh!" And he came over and he sat down at the piano. And I had known Prince, obviously through, fucking MTV and shit like that, only until the day we met in person. And the vast impression that he always cultivated was that he didn't fucking talk. Like, the Prince show sketch on SNL was Fred Armisen whispering all the time. And that was funny because that was true. Like, you can't find a lot of interview footage with Prince. He just didn't do it. Shied away from it. He eschewed it. He was very much like an artist should be shrouded in mystery. I'm not gonna fucking do interviews and shit like that. So there's not a lot of that, and so you don't have a representation of what he's like. You have no idea how he's gonna be in a room full of people. And holy shit, he was fantastic. It makes sense, he's a fucking show person, but he was on fire, electric. And naturally everybody in the room was there for him, and even the ones who had issue with music, once he showed up, were like, "I always knew you could do it, Prince." But he was electrified and spiritually imbued. Everything was tied back to the faith, and he started doing games, and they started having frank conversations. And I just kept telling Efsheen, everything on him, I've never seen him talk before. Efsheen's like, "I've worked here 10 years, I've never seen him speak." So he's just fucking going, man, just talking, and at one point he has people getting up because there was a lady who was just like, "Look, I'm not down with these lyrics about how I'm subjugated to some man." And he goes, "Well, every society needs to have rules, doesn't it?" He's like, "Let's play a game." He's going, "Okay, let's divide the room into 2 societies. Over here we believe the Bible, over here we believe whatever you want to believe. So who wants to come and join me over in this world?" And some people do, and then there's some people that stay over in the secular world and shit. And he goes, "Okay, we have rules in our world, but you guys don't have any rules at all. So guess what? I'm gonna come over, I'm gonna take your woman. Now your woman's with me. What happened? You need rules in your world." Shit like that. And I was like, I don't know if this all tracks, but he sure seems interested and committed to the conversation. Nobody's masturbating with a magazine, so this is fucking... So he was electric. And in my memory, I was like, oh my God, I'd never seen that version of Prince. And we did that for 2 fucking days. He did it, he repeated it the second day. The second day, I was like, "You coming?" He's going, "I'm gonna come later. You do it, and then I'll pop in at the end." It'd become a thing for him by then. So it's crazy watching him be the guy that I'd never seen in any interviews anywhere. And I was like, "Oh, look how chatty he is. Look how engaged he is." Because he was newly converted, and just when I started smoking weed back in the day, oh, fucking, you didn't want to know me. So they're like, let me tell you the benefits. You know, it's a weed, it grows everywhere. It's meant to be fucking smoked. We have cannabinoid receptors in our head. And shit, I would just fucking talk and talk. Go listen to the early podcast when I found weed. Holy fuck. He was like a recent convert, so he was happy to fucking talk about Jesus and fucking the direction that Jesus was giving his life. So it was pretty fascinating. My kid played basketball with him. That was fucking nuts. You know, I remember like the first night he did a show at the XL Center in St. Paul, which is a big fucking, you know, arena. And somebody said, oh, I saw your footage at the concert. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he had taken some of it and turned it into a recruitment film for the Jehovah's Witnesses. Which, yeah, is his footage to do with as he pleased. He never said he wasn't going to do that, and I didn't get into it, but I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know I was shooting a commercial. And then I wound up like leaving there and stuff. I never signed my fucking release or my NDA saying I won't talk about whatever happened here. It was in my back pocket when I left and shit. So, you know, I talked about fucking experience and shit like that on An Evening with Kevin Smith, and it's on YouTube. Somebody copied it over and shit. You could watch that whole story. He sure did. And I heard about it later on, man. I heard from his assistant. And she was talking about like, you know, she goes, do you have your NDA? And I said, yeah, I left with it. And she goes, oh, you're so lucky. I said, why? She goes, he wants to sue the fucking pants off you. I was like, for what? And she's going, Kevin, he saw the DVD. I was like, the DVD where I tell the story about working with Prince? And she's like, yeah. She's like, it was passed along like fucking hotcakes behind the scenes at Paisley Park with everybody going like, oh, he gets it, watch this shit. And then it finally got to Prince, and Prince watched it, and he was pissed. And the first thing he said to her was just like, get me his NDA. And she was like, I looked for it, I couldn't find it, that's why she called me. And I was like, oh no, I took it with me and stuff. And she was like, you're so fucking lucky. So, it was a dude I absolutely adored as an artist, and then he was, I remember I got a phone call from Jeff Jensen. He was a screenwriter. I think he wrote, did he write The Martian? I don't know. But he wrote something big. But back then he was working for Entertainment Weekly, right? So he called me one day and goes, oh, Kevin, I just interviewed Prince for his album. So he was doing the concert tour where he would, if you bought a ticket, you got an album, and that put him back on as the number one selling artist and shit. It was a really clever idea. So he had the cover of Entertainment Weekly. You know, it was a Time Warner publication. And he was like doing this interview with Jeff Jensen. Jeff Jensen goes, he talked about you, unprompted. I was like, nobody talks about me unless I make them. What do you mean? He's going, he brought you up out of nowhere. He goes, have you seen that Jersey Girl movie that Kevin Smith did? And I told him I had. And Prince goes, that's what happens when the potty mouth doesn't work for you anymore. And Jeff goes, do you have a quote back? And I was like, yeah, say I fucking hated Crystal Ball. Which was an album he put out. That was the best I could think of and shit. And I hated that because like this is somebody I deeply admired. And the story I told about him, I didn't think was horrendous. I thought it was a very humanizing inside story. It wasn't meant to be like, tear this guy down. You know, I talked about like his assistant told me, you know, he plays basketball. This is years before the Chappelle bit and shit. And I was like, I saw it for myself. When he played with the kid. This is before I saw him play with the kid and shit. And because I was like, what's he like? What's he like to work with and for? He's normal. He likes to do normal things. I was like what? She's like, he plays basketball all the time. He's like, Prince plays basketball? I said, yeah, he's always in. I was like, does he play in his outfits and heels and shit? And she goes, don't be ridiculous. He wears sweats and whatnot. I was like, where does he get the sweats? Are they custom made? And she looks around and she goes, Nordstrom's boys department. So shit like that, I told that story, man, and like I thought it was like, hey, it's cool, man, it's a humanized, but Prince don't want to be humanized, right? You like being the mystery of Prince and stuff. So I had to live knowing that fucking a guy I liked really didn't like me anymore. And when he passed away, like that hit even harder. Like I'm going to Knoxville tomorrow to do a show. I was in Knoxville when I found out that he passed. And I remember feeling so regretful because I was like, oh my God, like I sat at the hem of a true icon. And I traded it all away. I could have been friends with the guy. Like, he reached out to me, it wasn't vice versa. I traded it all away for some pithy anecdotes and shit like that. You know, that was a fun story to tell and whatnot. But, you know, I could have gone a different way with it. I was like, oh. And I remember the human side of it. Every once in a while it would come out and shit. Like, I asked him about the show at the XL Center. I was like, are you gonna do the most beautiful girl in the world? And he said no. He's going because that was for Maite. And when Maite, that was his wife. He said when Maite danced, when I played that song, Maite would dance. And now there's no more Maite, there's no more song. So shit like that, I remember thinking like, oh my God, this guy was like hurt. He was in a bad place in his life, you know, fucking some heartbreak and whatnot. And perhaps I compounded it years later by fucking like telling stories and shit. So I felt kind of bad. Then I got a chance to make up for it. Because they reached out to us about, I don't know, 2-3 months after he died. And some guy was like, is this Kevin Smith? I said, yeah. He said, did you ever make a documentary with Prince? And I was like, would you watch that clip on YouTube? Yeah, I tried to, but fucking he turned it into a recruitment film for the Jehovah's Witnesses. Last I heard the footage and shit. And he goes, well, we found the footage. And I was like, really? He's going, I'm gonna send you a little clip, see if you can verify. I don't know why he did. He sent me a 7-minute fucking clip of footage that like I could turn around and like sell to TMZ, because it's literally Prince talking, which, go find it. Go find Prince talking on the internet. Don't fucking exist. And so I was like, yeah, this is the shit I shot. And I too was like, oh my God, like it started to be a memory. Like I was like, maybe this didn't even fucking happen, but there was the footage, the piano, like I remember him sitting there, fucking swinging the camera around, all of that shit. I was like, this is my footage. And he goes, okay, stand by, somebody's gonna be reaching out to you. Somebody reached out to me. They're doing a big documentary. Remember Netflix, I guess, bought the library, or they made a deal with Prince Estate for everything that was in the vault, you know. And there's gonna be a big, massive 10-part documentary series about the life and work of Prince. They were working on it for the better since Prince passed away and shit like that. And so the women who were the producers came to my house one day, and they were like, we want to talk to you about the footage. I was okay. And they're like, can you give us the context by which all of this happened? Like, we need to know everything. And so I told them the fucking story I told you guys. He called me up and shit. Wait, he's gonna call in 2 hours, 1 hour, 15 minutes, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, and that's it. I said, yeah, and then I never saw him again. And they were like, okay, we're just gonna be upfront with you. Like, fucking, we went through the vault, Prince's storied vault, that is packed with recordings that he never released. He was one of the most prolific artists on the planet. He would make whole albums, and he would make music videos, whole music videos, shoot them, stick them in the vault. For the day that society collapsed, he'd be like, I'm gonna be the only guy in town, man. Me and my vault. So he was just loaded for life, you know? He could have fucking released music without recording any music because he had so much story. So they told me, they were like, we found tons of unreleased recordings, of music videos, but we have no footage of the man talking, except for the shit that you shot. Of everything in the vault, all that footage is the only representation, beyond singing, that Prince has a voice. And it is extraordinary, the things that he's talking about, because he was on fire. Again, it had nothing to do with me. I wasn't like, do it, Prince. I just held the camera on the fucking guy. And it wasn't even that me holding the camera, it was that sheet and shit. But he was just, like I said, in a place where he has so much to say. And they're like, it's fascinating. Like, it's, of everything there is, like, that's truly the goal. They're like, it's the one thing that can't be replicated. He'll never give another interview again. And we have a lot of music, but like, this represents the man's heart and fucking soul. So they're like, somebody's gonna be getting in contact with you. And I think originally Ava DuVernay was gonna be doing the documentary series, but then it wound up being the gentleman who did OJ, Only in America. So he came to my house, that documentary. So he came to my house, and we sat down and did like a 2-3 hour documentary. And he got me in the penitent mode, right? Like, fucking, here's my chance to make it up to Prince and say, like, I was the asshole for fucking going to tell a story. I should have fucking, like, been a friend, like, what he was probably looking for right now. But he wasn't interested in that. He was like, no, I get that, but tell me about when it was happening, how you felt. Did you feel that way then? I was like, well, I was a child then. Fucking, you know. But when we're all done with the interview, and I gave him the best I had, fucking every shred of fucking everything I remember, whatever. He's like, now that we're done, he's going, I'm gonna tell you why this interview matters. I was like, okay. He's going, of all the people we spoke to for this documentary, you know Prince the absolute least. But you have him talking the most, and you actually have the most to say about him. Everyone we spoke to in his life is very circumspect. Nobody wants to talk about warts and all and stuff like that. It's all nothing but like, oh, well, he was great, he was great. He's going, but you give us the human side, and all that footage of him talking is like the basis, the backbone for this entire fucking episode. I was like, are you serious? He's like, yeah, man. It's like, we don't have any of the footage of the man being interviewed. He's like, you can go back through the archives. When he was breaking on MTV, he would show up at award ceremonies and not talk unless he received an award. Even then, he let somebody else fucking talk. Like, and yet you've got hours of footage of this guy extrapolating on the music business and how it's being destroyed, how radio has been co-opted, and how when he was a child, you can go to Minnesota, you can go to New York, you can go to Chicago and hear 3 different kinds of music. Now it's all generically bland because radios are owned by one giant mega corporation, saying shit that's still relevant fucking today. So they tell me it's coming out like next year, that whole documentary series. So you're gonna be able to see that footage and stuff. It's on my phone if you want to watch it now. Is that good? Did you find out about Prince? Well, guess what? You're welcome.